March 15, 1944. Deep within a fortified communications hub 20 miles outside Tokyo, Commander Atsuzo Kurihara sat in his dimly lit office at the Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, ADA Communications Unit. His third cup of bitter, unyielding tea sat abandoned and cold beside him, a witness to the sleepless hours spent grappling with a singular enigma. For nearly a full day, Kurihara and his elite team of cryptanalysts, the sharpest minds Japan could muster to pierce Allied secrets, had been locked in a battle not of bullets and shells, but of sound waves and symbols. The radio receivers hummed quietly in the background, carrying a relentless stream of transmissions intercepted from the Pacific theater. These signals appeared to be tactical communications from American Marine Corps units, specifically from those engaged in operations around the Marshall Islands. But as Kurihara's ears strained, something confounded every conventional decryption method in their sophisticated arsenal. The transmissions were unmistakably structured, timed for coordinated maneuvers, rhythmic and repetitive, with precise durations matching known Marine Corps protocols, yet utterly indecipherable. The patterns suggested intelligence, strategy, orders flowing like lifeblood across the radio waves, but the spoken language defied understanding. This was not random noise or meaningless chatter. The signals presented a puzzle unlike any Kurihara had faced, despite years of his unit's successes. Breaking American diplomatic codes, decrypting British naval traffic, and famously penetrating the ultra-secret Purple Code before America's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. This time, however, they were met with silence from the code itself. The Japanese cryptanalysts were battling a linguistic ghost. Unbeknownst to the intelligence officers in the darkened war rooms of Tokyo, the mystery originated far from the tropical islands of the Pacific or the High Command's strategic planning tables. The key to this unbreakable code was rooted deep within the vast deserts and mesas of the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had nurtured and preserved a language unlike any other on Earth. The Navajo language, or Diné Bizad, belonged to the Athabascan family of languages and had been spoken for hundreds of years across the arid expanses spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. In 1940, roughly 170,000 Navajo lived almost exclusively within a 27,000 square mile reservation carved from these 4 states. Their language was not merely a tool for daily conversation, but a vessel of culture, history, and identity. An intricate weave of sounds and meanings uniquely adapted to the land and its people. To the untrained ear, Navajo might sound like rapid bursts of unrelenting syllables, but beneath this surface lay a complex linguistic architecture. Unlike English, which revolves primarily around nouns and adjectives, Navajo was fundamentally verb-centered. Actions and states were expressed through highly nuanced combinations of prefixes and suffixes, creating millions of possible word forms capable of describing intricate and specific events that could take paragraphs to explain in English. Further complicating matters, Navajo's phonology included 4 distinct tones: high, low, rising, falling, that altered word meaning entirely. Even a slight mispronunciation could transform a sentence from clarity into gibberish. Add to this the presence of phonemes utterly foreign to Japanese ears. Ejective stops, where air bursts sharply using the glottis. Voiceless lateral fricatives that resembled wind whistling through teeth. And nasalized vowels that Japanese speakers found virtually impossible to replicate or decipher. For the Japanese cryptographers, trained to crack complex ciphers but conditioned by the 5-vowel, relatively flat intonation structure of the Japanese language, this tonal and phonetic labyrinth was an impenetrable fortress. Amidst this linguistic maze, one man envisioned a way forward. Philip Johnston was a man uniquely qualified by virtue of both his upbringing and passion. Born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary family on the Navajo reservation, Johnston was among fewer than 30 non-Navajo who spoke the language fluently. As a child, he translated his father's sermons and communed closely with Navajo elders, absorbing traditions and vocabulary few outsiders could access. By adolescence, his bilingual skills had taken him to Washington, where he translated for Navajo leaders, even meeting President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, barely a month after the devastating Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Johnston read about U.S. Army experiments using the Comanche language for limited code efforts. While acknowledging their ingenuity, he realized these were piecemeal and insufficient for the scale of the global conflict now unfolding. Johnston believed Navajo, unbreakable, complex, and native to a loyal American people, could become a vital weapon. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his radical proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott, near San Diego. His demonstration was transformative. 4 fluent Navajo speakers transmitted sample messages that, astonishingly, took barely 20 seconds to send compared to the 30-minute transmissions typical of the best cipher machines. General Vogel immediately saw the promise. He authorized a pilot program to recruit and train Navajo speakers as code talkers, a new and secretive corps to revolutionize battlefield communications. By early May 1942, the first group of 29 Navajo recruits, drawn from all walks of life across the reservation, including men like Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benerly, swore their oaths at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. Some were young men who had attended government boarding schools where speaking Navajo had been met with punishment. Others were traditional shepherds and farmers, steeped in their ancestral culture. For 8 weeks at Camp Elliott, these men locked themselves away in guarded facilities and classrooms where they transformed their heritage into a military marvel. The challenge was immense. Create a code that was both impenetrable and practical for war, a living lexicon of new terms for weaponry and tactics that did not exist in traditional Navajo vocabulary. The code talkers developed ingenious cultural metaphors. A submarine became iron fish swimming beneath the waves, a battleship, the large whale of the ocean, fighter planes, the swift hummingbirds, and bombers, the ominous buzzards. Each letter of the alphabet was assigned multiple Navajo words to foil frequency analysis by enemy cryptographers. The commonly used letter E, for example, had 4 alternative Navajo word alternatives to prevent detectable patterns. No codebooks accompanied the men. Memorization was absolute, as any physical record risked capture and compromise. Chester Nez later reflected, "We drilled endlessly. A single mistake could cost lives. For us, words have power. Speaking correctly was sacred." This is where the story truly begins. The unbreakable code that would confound the Japanese Empire, transform military communications, and highlight an overlooked culture's profound contribution to victory. The vast deserts, canyons, and mesas of the American Southwest had cradled the Navajo people for centuries. Their language, Diné Bizad, was more than a means of communication. It was the heartbeat of a resilient culture shaped by history, environment, and spiritual beliefs. This language, preserved through oral tradition and vibrant storytelling, was about to become a battlefield secret that would imperil the Japanese war machine. To understand why the Navajo language baffled even the most advanced Japanese cryptanalysts, one must first grasp its fundamental nature. Unlike English, which predominantly uses nouns and adjectives, Navajo is a verb-centric language. The verbs do not merely denote actions, but encapsulate entire scenarios and relationships. Every verb can be infused with subtle prefixes and suffixes that convey tense, mood, direction, and intensity. These morphological building blocks create a near-infinite lexicon, allowing one word to express what might take several sentences in English. This linguistic complexity was compounded by Navajo's tonal system. It employs 4 distinct tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely change word meanings. A high tone on a syllable might denote a mountain, while a low tone could indicate water. The slightest mispronunciation risks erasing the intended message entirely. Japanese, by comparison, uses a relatively flat intonation with 5 simple vowel sounds. This tonal and phonological gap rendered deciphering Navajo transmissions through Japanese ears a baffling impossibility. The sounds were alien, the rhythms unintelligible. The phonetics were a fortress of their own. Navajo's ejective consonants, sounds produced by sudden bursts of air from the glottis, do not exist in many other languages. There were voiceless lateral fricatives, sounding like wind rushing through a narrow canyon, and nasalized vowels that further entangled comprehension. Even the most sophisticated Japanese linguists and cryptologists found themselves engulfed in confusion. They often recorded transmissions on primitive wax cylinders, slowed playback speed, consulted experts on various languages, and even brought in Buddhist monks who studied ancient tongues, yet none could unlock the code's meaning. While the linguistic characteristics made Navajo uniquely suited for encryption, this was only the first layer of the military code's ingenuity. The true magic lay in how the code talkers adapted their language for war. Philip Johnston's bold proposal to use Navajo as a code was revolutionary because it fused ancient tradition with cutting-edge military needs. The code talkers were tasked with translating modern warfare concepts into their language, a challenge both semantic and cultural. The battlefield demanded new vocabulary for weapons, vehicles, tactics, and technologies that had no precedence in Navajo life. To overcome this, the code talkers employed a strategy of metaphorical innovation deeply rooted in Navajo culture and worldview. This poetic adaptation created a living code, one that leveraged cultural logic to encode meaning while remaining natural for Navajo speakers. But the code's complexity didn't stop there. To thwart frequency analysis, a method that could potentially reveal patterns by tracking the most common letters or words, the code included multiple Navajo words for the same English letters or concepts. For instance, the letter E, the most frequently used letter in English, had 4 distinct Navajo words assigned to it. Code talkers would randomly alternate between these words, ensuring no detectable patterns emerged for enemy cryptographers. The code talkers memorized this complex vocabulary and alphabet system by heart. No physical code books were ever produced or carried into battle. Any such materials risked capture and catastrophic compromise. Chester Nez, one of the original 29 Navajo code talkers, said later, "We drilled endlessly. We knew a single mistake could cost lives. Words for us held sacred power. Speaking correctly was more than duty, it was an honor." For the Navajo code talkers, their language was not merely a tool. It was a sacred trust imbued with the power to save lives and shape history. The meticulous development of the code was matched by rigorous training. Recruits underwent intense drills to master transmission speed, precision, and endurance. They practiced under simulated battlefield conditions while wearing gas masks to replicate the difficulty of communication in combat. Subjects like radio interference, background battle noise, and exhaustion were all factored into their exercises. This preparation was essential. Every transmission had to be flawless. Any slip or error in pronunciation could jeopardize entire missions, leading to confusion, friendly fire, or failed attacks. The Navajo Code Talker program was unlike anything the Marine Corps had encountered. It combined linguistic artistry, cultural heritage, and military innovation into a unique fighting force. As the first groups completed their training, the code talkers were deployed into the Pacific Theater, where their language would become a fortress against Japanese attempts to intercept and decode vital communications. While the Japanese naval analysts continued their fruitless search for patterns and solutions, the Navajo code talkers prepared to turn the tide of war by wielding a weapon forged in the unlikeliest of places. A language shaped by centuries of culture, mystery, and resilience. August 1942. The tropical heat and humidity of the Guadalcanal campaign sealed the beginning of one of the Pacific War's most crucial struggles. Beneath the canopy of dense jungle, a groundbreaking experiment was about to be tested. 15 Navajo code talkers had landed at Guadalcanal with the 1st Marine Division, carrying with them a code that would forever change the nature of military communications. The Japanese, entrenched on the island, had expected the invasion. Their cryptographers had long penetrated most Allied codes, intercepting vital radio transmissions that revealed troop movements, supply requests, and battle plans. This intelligence advantage allowed the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army to prepare counterattacks and mount fierce resistance. But suddenly, a baffling silence fell over the listening posts at the Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, a linguist trained at Stanford University before the war, carefully monitored the radio traffic from Guadalcanal. The transmissions came in steady, rhythmic bursts, with the unmistakable cadence of a spoken language. Yet the words did not correspond to any known Allied language. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, nor any Filipino or Chinese dialect. The sounds were structured, yet alien. The Japanese's curiosity morphed quickly into fixated obsession. After months of laborious effort, the Imperial Navy assigned their top cryptanalysts exclusively to the task of penetrating this new code. They recorded and replayed hundreds of hours of transmissions, using every technology available: wax cylinder recordings, slowed-down playback devices, oscilloscopes turning sounds into visual graphs, and painstaking mathematical and statistical analyses to detect patterns. But silence was the result. The code talkers' use of Navajo was a cryptographic fortress. The intricate tonal nature of the language, combined with deliberate randomization of equivalent words and cultural metaphors, rendered conventional cryptanalytic techniques useless. Even the most promising lead, one of the captured Navajo soldiers, Joe Kailumia, failed to break the code. Fluent in Navajo but unaware of the specialized military code layered onto it, Kailumia could hear the words but found them meaningless. His inability to interpret the messages, despite grueling interrogation and torture at Japanese hands, underscored the code's impenetrability. The Imperial Navy's intelligence report from May 1943 reflected this bewilderment. The prisoner appears native to the mystery language, but cannot comprehend messages. Assessment concludes enemy uses specialized code within native language, requiring specific training. In the meantime, as the battles raged, the code talkers performed with astonishing success. Chester Nez, one of the youngest of the original code talkers, vividly recalled the adrenaline-charged moments when his short 14-second transmissions conveyed artillery coordinates that decimated enemy positions, leaving Japanese machine gun nests obliterated before they could mount a counterattack. These messages were intercepted, but remained an unsolvable enigma for Japanese radio operators. To them, the transmissions were unintelligible noise, a ghostly cipher that thwarted every attempt at interpretation. U.S. Marine commanding officers quickly recognized the importance of this code. Major General Alexander Vandergrift praised the Navajo code talkers as invaluable. noting their transmissions were faster and far more secure than any mechanical cipher machine. Following Guadalcanal's shocking success, the Navajo Code Talker program expanded rapidly. By mid-1943, a dedicated school at Camp Pendleton began formal training, producing classes every 8 weeks. The recruits underwent grueling regimens, practicing transmissions in soundproof booths, enduring exhausting physical drills, and learning to communicate flawlessly while wearing gas masks amidst simulated combat conditions. On the Japanese side, desperation grew. They attempted innovative techniques, such as musical analysis to detect tonal patterns, comparing Navajo transmissions to indigenous Native American recordings, and consulting scholars with expertise in American languages. They even sought assistance from their wartime German allies, who proved unable to contribute due to unfamiliarity and operational difficulties. Rewards were offered, up to 10,000 yen and a decade's salary, for capturing Code Talker equipment and code materials. The Japanese intelligence directives escalated to capturing these warriors alive. Yet none were ever caught with their radio gear or code knowledge intact. The pivotal battles of the Central Pacific Campaign further underscored the Navajo Code's critical strategic role. At Tarawa, in November 1943, 6 code talkers transmitted continuously for 76 brutal hours. Lloyd Oliver famously maintained non-stop transmissions for 48 hours, coordinating naval gunfire amid ceaseless artillery shelling. The complexity of this code was evident, as it allowed rapid, error-free communication of tactical orders, artillery support, medical evacuations, and supply logistics. The speed and accuracy were unmatched. Artillery requests, once taking 30 minutes using cipher machines, could now be executed in 20 seconds. Japanese commanders lamented their loss of battlefield intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Horikawa admitted, "Once the Marines landed, all their communications became a black box. We fought blind." As the Navy's 4th Intelligence Section dedicated 30 cryptanalysts to focus solely on Navajo transmissions, their painstaking efforts revealed only surface patterns. Probable call signs or message lengths correlated with operation types, but with no comprehension of underlying content. In one notable instance during Saipan, Code Talker Jimmy King transmitted artillery commands for 6 continuous hours during a fierce Japanese counterattack, coordinating multiple battalions under heavy fire. His partner had been killed, but King pressed on, embodying the courage and precision that defined the Code Talker's vital role. The story of the Navajo Code Talkers was no longer a secret held merely by a few military officers. It was a turning point that shifted the tide of the war in the Pacific and baffled Japan's finest intelligence operatives. As 1943 progressed, the initial success of the Navajo Code Talkers at Guadalcanal sent ripples through the U.S. Marine Corps command structure. The whirlwind victory wasn't just a testament to military might, but to the power of a code born from tradition and innovation. Recognizing this, the Marine Corps swiftly expanded the program, transforming the original small group into a formidable force critical to every major Pacific operation. At Camp Pendleton, California, a dedicated Navajo Code Talkers school sprang to life. The program grew rigorous and exacting. Men arrived from scattered corners of the Navajo Nation, some from traditional families, others from boarding schools where speaking their language had once been forbidden. Despite these varied backgrounds, the recruits formed an unbreakable bond, bonded by the sacred responsibility they carried. Training was unlike anything the Marine Corps had seen. Code Talkers honed their skills in soundproof booths inside locked and guarded buildings, shielded from prying ears. Their lessons were exacting drills on transmission speed, accuracy, and endurance. The instructors introduced battlefield distractions, simulated gunfire, explosions, and the claustrophobic hiss of gas mask breathing. One recruit, Thomas Bay, who enlisted at the tender age of 15, remembered, "They pushed us beyond the possible. Every call, every word mattered. Lives depended on our accuracy." The code itself evolved continuously, adapting to new technologies and complexities of modern warfare. As innovations like the atomic bomb and kamikaze pilots emerged, the code vocabulary expanded, inventing fresh metaphorical terms fitting their deadly reality. The atomic bomb was the metal egg. Kamikaze pilots became death winds. Throughout this training and innovation, memorization remained paramount. No written code books, no physical manuals accompanied these warriors. Everything lived within their minds, safeguarded by thousands of hours of practice. Mistakes were not merely academic errors. They could cost lives and missions on the battlefield. By mid-1943, the Navajo Code Talker force grew to hundreds. They deployed across all 6 Marine divisions, serving in every pivotal campaign across the Pacific, from the bloody shores of Tarawa to the sprawling archipelago battles of Saipan, Peleliu, and ultimately Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The Japanese response was ruthless, but futile. Their intelligence units dedicated unprecedented resources to breaking this code. 30 cryptanalysts zeroed in exclusively on Navajo transmissions, led by experts like Captain Yoshiro Tanaka and Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada. These analysts employed specialized recording equipment to slow down the tonal transmissions without warping the pitch, visual sound analysis via oscilloscopes, and tapped into university linguists and ancient language scholars in a desperate bid for understanding. Despite these exhaustive efforts, Japanese cryptographers could only pinpoint superficial patterns. Call signs, message timing, correlations between message length and operation scale. But without a true grasp of the word's meanings, the secret linguistic fortress held firm. The enemy's frustration grew palpable. Colonel Haruo Konuma, 17th Army intelligence officer, lamented, "We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Their inability to decode tactical messages robbed them of battlefield predictions, forcing reactive strategies bracing for unknown strikes. Beyond technology, the Japanese resorted to psychological warfare. They ordered vast rewards, 10,000 yen, or 10 years' salary, for any capture of code talkers or their materials. They attempted to capture radio operators alive, interrogating and torturing those taken prisoner. One such example was Joe Kailumia, a Navajo soldier fluent in his language but untrained in the military code. Japanese captors subjected him to brutal torture, water solvents, freezing cold, and starvation, trying to force decoding. Yet Kailumia could only repeat the nonsensical combinations, bearing silent witness to the code's human resilience. The code talkers' battlefield contributions were monumental. At the bloody Battle of Tarawa in November 1943, 6 code talkers endured a relentless 76-hour bombardment, maintaining continuous communication despite constant enemy fire. Lloyd Oliver transmitted for an astounding 48 straight hours, directing naval gunfire with unerring precision, even as shells exploded around him. As the American forces pushed deeper into Japanese-held territory, communications remained fast, efficient, and secure. The difference was clear. Messages that once took 30 minutes with cipher machines now completed in seconds, saving crucial time and lives. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was profound. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Hirakawa, who could break many conventional Allied communications, admitted frustration. The moment the Marines landed, the tactical intelligence disappeared. It was as if our battle plans had vanished into thin air. The Navajo Code's effectiveness extended beyond battlefield coordination. Code talkers conveyed everything: troop movements, artillery coordinates, medical evacuations, supply needs, and critical tactical orders. They performed under extreme stress, in gunfire and gas, never faltering. Jimmy King, another code talker, relayed artillery instructions for 6 hours during a harsh counterattack after his partner was killed. Undaunted, he ensured the survival of his comrades through sheer resolve and flawless communication. The code talkers didn't just send messages, they shaped battles and saved lives, embodying the warrior spirit encoded not just in language, but in duty. By late 1943, as the war in the Pacific intensified, Japanese intelligence faced mounting humiliation and frustration. Their greatest cryptographic defeats had come not from gaps in technology, but from the fortress of language they could neither pierce nor comprehend. The Navajo code talkers had upended every wartime assumption about security. Despite having some of the most skilled linguistic analysts and cryptographers, the Japanese were no closer to cracking what had become known as the Marine Corps' Unbreakable code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section dedicated 30 full-time cryptanalysts exclusively to the task of deciphering the Navajo transmissions. Led by passionate officers like Captain Yoshiro Tanaka and Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada, the team applied every tool and theory available. They developed special recording devices capable of slowing transmissions without distorting the vital tonal qualities. They created visual sound maps using oscilloscopes, translating audio waves into shapes hoped to reveal patterns. Musical analysis was attempted, theorizing the tones might follow a compositional structure. They consulted academics who had studied indigenous American languages and even brought in Buddhist monks versed in ancient phonetics. Yet all efforts foundered against the code's complexity. Japanese analysts could identify surface elements, probable call signs, message length connected loosely to operation complexity, and occasional repeated phrases. But crucially, they could not understand the core content. The code was linguistic, cultural, and cryptographic art blended seamlessly into one. Time and again, the analysts were forced to admit bitter defeat. Colonel Masao Yamada later confessed, "No understanding of a single word. We were listeners without comprehension." The psychological toll on Japanese commanders was palpable. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, recorded in his reports, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We are now fighting blind. They can anticipate our moves. We cannot." On the front lines, the code talkers embodied quiet heroism and relentless dedication. Their burdens were immense, mastering a living code, enduring their own battles, and carrying the weight of critical communications that could mean victory or death. One of the most intense tests of the code talkers' mettle came during the Battle of Peleliu in September 1944. In this ferocious fight, code talker Jimmy King faced unrelenting fire after his operator partner was killed. Over 6 grueling hours, King transmitted artillery coordinates and tactical orders, keeping 3 battalions coordinated against desperate counterattacks. His transmissions were flawless under pressure, embodying the discipline and courage that defined the Code Talker Corps. The Mariana Islands campaign further showcased the code's strategic value. On Saipan, 24 code talkers operated around the clock, their transmissions weaving the intricate fabric of the invasion that crippled the Japanese defensive perimeter and turned the course of the war. Japanese forces intensified countermeasures. Voice mimicry was attempted, with Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto forcing himself to mimic Navajo tones. Code talkers recalled his attempts as resembling someone gargling while trying to talk, utterly failing to reproduce the nuances necessary for successful deception. Electronic jamming, increased radio static, and arrest orders for anyone suspected to be a code talker all underscored Japanese desperation. Amid the relentless march of Pacific campaigns, The pinnacle of the Navajo code talkers' contributions came during the Battle for Iwo Jima in February 1945. Major Howard Connor, General Holland Smith's communications officer, coordinated the initial assault through a network of 6 code talker teams. For 48 continuous hours, the code talkers transmitted and received over 800 messages without a single error. Their language, coded, sacred, and fundamentally impenetrable, proved the linchpin to the American victory. Japanese interrogators post-war acknowledged their stark defeat. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisu, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto of the Imperial Navy stated, "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our greatest cryptanalytic failure." As the tide of war pushed deeper into the Pacific, the Navajo Code Talker program matured into an indispensable core of Marine Corps communication. From the early trainings at Camp Pendleton to the brutal campaigns across the islands, hundreds of Navajo Marines carried the weight of a secret burden. Their language, a weapon as vital as any rifle or artillery piece. The training regimen remained relentless. Recruits, many barely out of their teens, endured harsh drills designed not just to teach, but to steel their nerves for the horrors ahead. They learned to transmit flawlessly under smoke, gunfire, and gas attacks. Wearing gas masks while sending complex coded messages, they rehearsed exhaustion, confusion, and chaos, the everyday realities of frontline combat. Their commitment was rooted in deep cultural honor. For many, speaking Navajo was sacred, a trust passed down through generations. Every word held power, every syllable sacred. They knew a slip could cost lives, and humbly carried the knowledge that their unique gift was decisive in the struggle for freedom. The code itself continued evolving as the war progressed. New military realities required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became metal egg, embodying a nascent weapon of unprecedented destruction. Kamikaze pilots were death winds, ominous signs born on the breeze. This linguistic innovation preserved the code's integrity while adapting to a rapidly changing battlefield landscape. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was profound and sustained. Despite possessing vast intelligence resources, Japan's inability to crack the Navajo code shattered morale and bred a growing sense of helplessness. Japanese commanders reported a vague but persistent dread at the invisible barrier that cloaked American movements and intentions. Lieutenant General Hiroshi Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commander of the Iwo Jima defenses, had prepared extensively for American raids, fortifying the island with 11 miles of interconnected tunnels and underground fortresses. His strategy relied heavily on intercepting and decoding U.S. radio transmissions to coordinate defenses and counterattacks. But these plans faltered. The Navajo transmissions came shrouded in impenetrable language. For the Japanese, it was like speaking against a wall. Commander Colonel Shigo Hayashi reported directly, "The Americans' codes remain unbroken. Our operations follow an unknown pattern." Code talker teams operated under continuous threat, yet they remained unfazed. At Okinawa, the war's largest amphibious assault, 35 code talkers sustained communications among 183,000 troops over an 82-day campaign, marked by brutal casualties and fierce combat. Japanese forces intensified their countermeasures, resorting to jamming and poorly executed voice mimicry. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's attempts to imitate Navajo were remembered by code talker Alfred Newman as sounding like someone gargling while trying to talk. The stakes were high. Every communication carried the pulse of battle, and any breach could be fatal. Yet the code held firm, a testament to its creators and the warriors who wielded it. One of the poignant ironies of the Code Talker story lies in the broader context of Navajo and Native American history. For decades, Navajo language and culture had been suppressed by government policies that forbade speaking indigenous languages in schools and punished their use. But in the crucible of war, that very language became America's secret weapon. As the Pacific War intensified through 1944 and into 1945, Japanese intelligence realized the futility of conventional cryptanalysis against the Navajo code. But their quest for a breakthrough continued with desperation. Japanese forces launched a series of countermeasures that ranged from technical interference to psychological efforts, all designed to undermine the Code Talker's effectiveness. Electronic jamming attempts tried to drown out Navajo transmissions with radio static. The Japanese Navy deployed false radio signals in hopes of confusing American communications. Voice mimicry was practiced by officers like Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto, but their imitation fell far short of Navajo's tonal complexities, earning derision from the Code Talkers themselves. Alfred Newman recalled Miyamoto's efforts as sounding like someone gargling while trying to talk, utterly incompetent at reproducing the precise phonetics necessary. Japanese commanders offered generously for any code materials or operators captured alive. Bounties reached 10,000 yen, or a decade's salary. Interrogation centers held Navajo prisoners like Joe Kailumia, whose torture exemplified the lengths they would go. Yet these men could do no more than repeat meaningless phrases, unable to crack the specialized code built on their own language. While Japan's resources funneled into breaking the code failed, the Navajo Code Talkers experienced some of their fiercest and most vital combat assignments. At Peleliu, amidst brutal jungle fighting, Code Talker Jimmy King emerged as a hero. After his radio partner was killed, King transmitted for 6 unrelenting hours, coordinating resources, artillery, and reinforcements. His flawless transmissions proved decisive in holding American lines against fierce counterattacks. The Mariana and Palau campaigns also saw unprecedented levels of Navajo activity. On Saipan, 24 Code Talkers continuously managed communication at every front line, relaying orders, coordinating naval and air support, and tracking medical evacuations, a complex ballet of war sustained by their voices. But the Code Talkers' defining moment came at Iwo Jima. For 48 continuous hours, during one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific, 6 Navajo Code Talkers maintained a web of communications that synchronized landings, naval bombardments, and airstrikes, vital to the success of 30,000 Marines engaged in some of the fiercest combat of the war. Major Howard Connor, responsible for communications coordination, later stated, "Without the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." Japanese defenders, led by General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, had spent 2 years preparing underground fortifications, hoping to use intercepted American communications to counter every maneuver. But these hopes were dashed completely. The Navajo code provided a tactical veil impenetrable and continuous. The unbroken record of transmissions, over 800 without error in those first crucial days, underscored the code's perfection. The speed and accuracy saved countless lives, enabled precision artillery strikes, and adapted fluidly to the fierce, chaotic nature of island warfare. Okinawa presented another epic trial. 35 Code Talkers operated through 82 bloody days of combat, coordinating the largest amphibious operation in the Pacific with 183,000 troops. The Japanese again attempted jamming and infiltration, but the code held steadfast. The psychological effects on the enemy were profound. Japanese commander, Colonel Shigo Hayashi, acknowledged the operatives' emotions. frustrated and haunted by their inability to penetrate or anticipate Allied plans. Lieutenant General Arasui bluntly admitted post-war, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic. But the Marine Tactical Code was untouchable." The Navajo code talkers were both warriors and keepers of a sacred trust. Their unique service combined cultural heritage with military necessity and demonstrated how ancient languages could meet modern warfare's demands. While the Navajo code talkers are the most celebrated, the legacy of code talking in World War II extends far beyond a single tribe. In fact, the concept of using Native American languages as living military codes was pioneered decades earlier, in World War I, and embraced by several tribes during World War II across both the Pacific and European theaters. Beyond the Navajo Nation's 375 to 420 Marines who served as code talkers, at least 14 other tribes contributed their languages to the Allied war effort. The Comanche, Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, Meskwaki, and others fielded code talkers who performed critical communication roles in various units. 17 Comanche code talkers famously served in Europe, landing on D-Day to relay tactical messages that confounded German forces. The Cherokee and Lakota code talkers similarly provided invaluable battlefield communication in both theaters, proving Native American languages to be more than relics of the past. They were dynamic tools of modern warfare. Recognition for code talkers was slow and incomplete for decades after the war. The program remained classified well into the Cold War, its details hidden to preserve potential future intelligence use. Many code talkers returned home unable to share their story, facing the same systemic discrimination their peoples had long endured. Denied voting rights, barred from public accommodations, and marginalized in their communities. It wasn't until 1968 that the Navajo Code Talker program was officially declassified, opening the door for public acknowledgement. The first formal recognition came in 1969 at a 4th Marine Division reunion. President Ronald Reagan proclaimed August 14, 1982, as National Navajo Code Talkers Day, a symbolic acknowledgement of the Code Talkers' service. But the most significant honors came on July 26, 2001, when President George W. Bush awarded Congressional Gold Medals to the original 29 Navajo Code Talkers at a ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda, the nation's highest civilian honor. Only 5 of the original members survived to attend, their presence a powerful reminder of the sacrifices underlying the Code's success. Chester Nez, the last original Code Talker to pass in 2014, reflected humbly, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war." The broader Native American contributions would be officially acknowledged through legislation. The Code Talkers Recognition Act of 2008 expanded congressional recognition across tribes who had contributed code talkers, ensuring that the valor and ingenuity of indigenous servicemen were included in America's military history. Beyond honors and medals, the Code Talkers transformed how Native Americans viewed themselves and how the broader nation viewed Native cultures. Dr. Jennifer Dennett-Dale noted, "They proved our languages aren't museum pieces, but living resources." Federal funding today supports programs renewing and preserving indigenous languages, many of which face extinction. The Navajo Code Talker story has become a bridge connecting past trauma with hope for linguistic and cultural revival. Young Native Americans now study their ancestral languages with pride, inspired by the legacy of warriors who wielded words as power in America's darkest hours. At the same time, the Navajo Code Talkers' story echoes forward into modern intelligence and cryptography. Their success demonstrated that the human mind, cultural diversity, and language can create security systems far beyond mechanical or mathematical solutions. This lesson resonates today as quantum computing threatens traditional encryption methods. The Navajo language and other indigenous tongues, once suppressed by assimilation policies, stand today as symbols of resilience and indispensable strategic assets. The end of World War II should have marked the beginning of honor and recognition for the Navajo code talkers, the young men who had wielded their language as an unbreakable weapon. Yet for many years, their story was bound in silence, hidden under layers of military secrecy and societal prejudice. The Navajo Code Talker program remained classified well into the Cold War. The military feared that revealing the code might compromise future operations or give potential enemies an advantage. As a result, code talkers returned home, unable to speak of their crucial wartime contributions, even to their own families. This secrecy compounded the hardships many already faced. Returning to states like New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, code talkers entered communities that often denied them basic civil rights. Voting rights were withheld until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, and as late as 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants frequently refused them service. They were heroes who had saved lives around the world, but were treated with the same marginalization that had defined Native American history for centuries. For individuals like Chester Nez, the weight of their unspoken heroism was heavy. He reflected, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but we couldn't tell anyone." The burden was profound. Many found solace and healing through traditional ceremonies. The Navajo Enemy Way ceremony emerged as a vital ritual to purify warriors spiritually from the violence and trauma of war. It reaffirmed the sacredness of their language and spirit after years of silence. For decades, the code talker's story remained a closely guarded secret, known to few outside military circles. Only gradually did their efforts begin to permeate public consciousness. In 1968, the program was finally declassified, opening the door for the veterans to share their experiences. The first acknowledgement came at a 4th Marine Division reunion in 1969, but widespread recognition was slow. The code talkers continued to live modest lives, their heroism unrecognized by many. It wasn't until the 1980s that public awareness blossomed. President Ronald Reagan declared August 14, 1982, as National Navajo Code Talkers Day, formally honoring their service. Despite the growing recognition, many code talkers remained humble, emphasizing their role as part of a larger Marine Corps team rather than seeking personal glory. The road to full acknowledgement spanned decades, culminating in the 2001 presentation of Congressional Gold Medals by President George W. Bush to the original 29 Navajo code talkers. Only 5 men survived to witness this historic tribute, marking a long-delayed chapter finally written into the American story. Though their wartime messages were constructed in secret, the code talkers' legacy became known and celebrated as an emblem of ingenuity, resilience, and the profound intersection of culture and national service. The conclusion of World War II brought peace to the world, but left a complex legacy for the Navajo code talkers. Their remarkable wartime contributions remained cloaked in secrecy long after the last shots were fired, and many returned home to a nation still struggling with deep-seated prejudice against Native Americans. For decades, the code talkers bore the burden of their silence, unable to share the incredible story of how their language had helped win the war. They returned to communities that often denied them fundamental rights and opportunities, including voting and equal service in public places, yet the code talkers carried themselves with quiet dignity, their commitment unshaken by injustice. The declassification of the Navajo Code in 1968 unlocked their story, inspiring growing recognition across the United States and around the world. Over time, awareness transformed into celebration. a celebration not only of military genius, but of cultural resilience. On August 14, 1982, President Ronald Reagan officially designated National Navajo Code Talkers Day, forever linking the calendar to their heroic service. The ultimate national honor came in 2001, when President George W. Bush awarded the original 29 surviving Navajo Code Talkers the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian award, in a ceremony held in the Capitol Rotunda. Only a handful of those original warriors were alive to witness the historic day, underscoring the passage of time and the preciousness of their sacrifice. The Code Talkers' legacy extends beyond medals and ceremonies. Their story has reignited pride among Native American youth in their languages and cultures, inspiring revitalization efforts across tribes whose voices were once suppressed. Today, the Navajo language is taught in schools, supported by federal initiatives inspired by the Code Talker heritage. The program's success demonstrated to the world that indigenous languages are living, complex systems capable of expressing both sacred ceremonies and the advanced demands of modern warfare. Importantly, the Navajo Code Talkers also reshaped America's narrative about diversity and strength. They embodied how the nation's strength came from embracing difference, a powerful counterpoint to the racist ideology espoused by the Axis powers, especially Imperial Japan. Japanese scholarship, too, has reflected on the extraordinary enigma of the Navajo Code. Studies have revealed the depth of Japanese failure to solve a code rooted in a language and culture they could neither understand nor respect. Today, only a handful of Navajo Code Talkers remain, their voices carrying the echoes of a unique chapter in history that bridges past and present, war and peace, and cultures separated by centuries, yet united in humanity. The Navajo Code Talkers proved that language itself can be a weapon of war, a shield of freedom, and a beacon of cultural pride. Their story will endure, a testament to human ingenuity, the power of heritage, and the unbreakable bonds forged by words spoken in courage and honor.